Welcome to the Women's Digital Rights panel. It's the second year that we have a panel at CPDP on privacy, data protection, and women. And I'm very proud to be chairing this year's edition and also last year's edition. I'm very proud in general. But so what is this issue about women privacy and data protection? I think we know it's a very, very broad issue. I always say there are actually two big sets of issues. One is the presence and the role of women in the privacy field, which is something that is more or less close to us and it's rather visible. But there is another wide set of issues, which is about the real world, what happens to women outside our own little privacy field, what are their privacy and the right to personal data protection. This year we thought we could try to narrow a little bit the discussion by focusing actually on the question of the presence of women online. So what happens when women are in public online, digitally in public? I understand this is an issue of freedom of expression. It is an issue of many, many rights that are involved, but it's also about privacy. Of course, if we understand privacy as a wide right, not as the right to be hiding in the toilet, but privacy as the right to have presence in public. So I will just say this, we have a great set of speakers. We also have a great moderator, so I will leave the floor to her. It's Jennifer Baker, from Journalists at the Register. She's an expert in all things related to policy technology in Europe and beyond. So just please, Jennifer, have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we were going to, Cheryl here obviously has some slides, as you can see behind me. So we're going to let Cheryl Miller kick off from Digital Leadership Institute, and then we're going to try and have a really, hopefully, you're all sitting so far away, it's a bit disappointing. There are seats at the front. Dark. And it's dark, but we want to have more of a conversation rather than a panel of people talking at you, which is a very possibly male-centric way of doing things. So, we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But Cheryl, I'm going to hand over to you first.
Okay. Can you tell me how much time I have? Because I'll be really honest, we had a very busy weekend this weekend. I'm going to just show you the slide that popped up. So I grabbed this presentation because we ran the first ever, it's kind of a startup event for women. We call it a Female Digital Starter Weekend. Kind of a new product on the startup landscape called Move It Forward. And in fact, the subject of this event was cyber violence and promoting online safety for girls and women, that we know is a very topical question and is a bit intersects what we're talking about today, because it is very much about the policy sphere. And you know, some of the topics that we explored were, in fact, how victims very quickly also become the instigators, where perpetrators of online abuse then end up becoming victims themselves. So it's a very fuzzy, gray, difficult area as far as privacy and data protection is concerned. And I'm really proud to say that we had 40 women from 15 to 55 who participated in this event for 2 full days. And we actually broached, in some of the solutions that were proposed, we broached this very topic. So how far can we go in pinpointing an aggressor or a suspected perpetrator of cyber violence, that broad term? How far can we go in defending our online personas, even our offline personas, without infringing upon their rights? So I think this is a really interesting topic. But on the other hand, because this problematic of cyber violence is so great and it disproportionately impacts girls and women, I didn't want our participants to stop from coming up with solutions because of the data privacy data protection question. So I'd like to, if I can just take 2 minutes, maybe then step back from that, tell you a little bit about our institute, the Digital Leadership Institute, kind of the other things that we're doing, and to contextualize the discussion, you know, why I'm here today, why I care about this stuff. And also maybe give you some of the statistics that I shared with our group that can also maybe set the stage for our discussion, because it is a very important topic and no one really has the answers yet. So the first thing I'd like to say is that, yeah, this is floated around, but I think I was one of the first to share it. I always say a free and open internet is a girl's best friend. And I'm afraid that, here I might be preaching to the choir, but more broadly, that just in general, girls and women don't understand how important the, free online environment is for them, let alone are they active in defending those rights. So that's part of our mission as the Digital Leadership Institute. And our broader mission is bridging the gender gap and the digital divide. So tackling that question and getting that message out there is one of my primary concerns. Why is that important? Because, yeah, there are 7.3 billion people in the world. Only this many of them are actually online, though. And there are less women online than men, and the rate of adoption is slower among women. So what I always try to impress upon our demographics, that's young girls and adult women, is that even if we promote digital as the panacea, in fact, we're not really addressing the majority even of the population. And we need to make sure that in terms of rights and empowerment, that we are concerned about our female sisters out there who aren't even online and don't have enjoy the kind of opportunities that we do. But there's a downside of that, of course. Here's my standard spiel on women in leadership, particularly in digital leadership. Only 13% of publicly traded companies in Europe have women, or there's only 13% of women on board in European publicly traded companies. Only 1 in 5 employees in the tech sector is European. 1 in 8 of female tech starters is in industry. All the rest is service and such. And it's very, and I'm really not sure, because there's, I say you measure what you treasure. We don't even know how many female tech starters there are out there. But the informal statistics in Belgium are that 3% of all tech startups are led by women. But you guys know about all this, despite the fact that there's now, I think, 8 years of research, especially from McKinsey, telling us that more women in leadership leads to better decision making, better resonance with the user base, and a positive impact on the bottom line. So what? Nothing has changed. And this new statistic for me that floored me from McKinsey that says that 80% of women are disenfranchised from corporate careers over time. 80%. Where do they go? They're kind of out there in the market. And 85% of single proprietorships in Europe are women-led. We don't know what impact that has on the GDP or on employment. These women are just out there running their own businesses on their own. They may or may not be online. But the mission that we have, especially with this Move It Forward initiative, is to match younger women who are the so-called digital natives with these experienced business women who are out there, and get them to be starting up digital enterprises together. So we tackle female 18 and over, and we address young girls too. We have a whole initiative that's called, I'm just gonna blow through this now. We have a whole initiative called the G Hive that is a network connecting initiatives to promote science and technology to young girls. And just like the Move It Forward event, this year we will be launching something called the Girl Tech Fest in Brussels, and we hope to roll it out more broadly. And I'll just close by throwing in these statistics for the bigger discussion. I'm very active at the UN level with what was the Gender Working Group for the United Nations ITU Broadband Commission. It has now been disbanded. But one of our last efforts was to release the first ever global report on cyber violence among girls and women. And these are some of the frightening findings. And a lot of the content came from Europe. 1 in 3 women in Europe will experience physical violence by a partner in their lifetime, so that's just more broadly. 73% of women have experienced some kind of cyber violence, hate speech, bullying, or harassment. That is across the board. Women are 27% more likely than men to experience harassment online, and this, for me, is the kicker. 9 million girls in Europe have experienced cyber violence by the time they're 15. Of course, a lot of them are also perpetrators of cyber violence, so it's a mixed bag. And a couple of things I think to launch this discussion is that now on the global level as well as on the European level, we have started to, just accepting the definition, using the term cyber violence has been, once I started using it online, I became the target of cyber violent behavior, just as an example. So this is something that we're told doesn't exist, but you'll be reassured to know that at the United Nations as well as the European level and the Convention of Istanbul, that cyber violence, the threat of violence, the threat of psychological violence are considered violence. And the Istanbul Convention has been adopted by the European Council, which means it will be adopted by the member states in Europe. So this definition is going forward, and it means, and it's quite progressive, relatively speaking. It means that there will be a legal infrastructure in place eventually to treat this, this issue and to give the victims recourse, but that's not out there today. So this is the thing that I would like to discuss, actually, is how we build and navigate a safe online experience for everyone, and at the same time respect these conditions of our anonymity and our right to privacy and data protection at the same time.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll probably come back and have a look at some of those statistics in the conversation. I'm sure most of you here recognize all the panelists, but Gloria, you've met now. Cheryl, we've heard from. At the far end, it's Renata Avila from the World Wide Web Foundation. Then we have Jillian York from EFF. And next to me, we have Belma Kucukalic. Yes?
Perfect.
Okay. I was nervous about that. Now, a couple of people said to me, what are you doing at CPDP? I said, I'm doing this panel, this loving the hate-free, no-hate web. I said, the Women in Tech panel. And I thought, well, this is kind of problematic because maybe we should actually, women in tech sort of makes it sound like women are the problem. And I thought, well, maybe we should have an assholes in tech panel because this is really what the problem is. So I'm going to throw it over to the ladies down here. Renata, do you think we focus, because there are other issues, there are not just women, but say queer identities and other identities, and saying women versus men is a very sort of cis-centric way of talking about it. So perhaps you'd like to give me, do you think we should be tackling the problem instead of the victims in how we identify what we want to talk about?
Well, sorry. While coming here, I was thinking what should be like the message that I want to transmit to the privacy community. And one of the most important messages while analyzing why many of the problems that women face online that have nothing to do with the assholes is one of the primary problems is that women often do not understand how tech operates. And for example, if I explain to a little girl what is digital, the young girls are born with the digital technologies. We were like a kind of transit people, and we understand the difference between offline and online, and we had to go to the transition and understand that digital means multiple copies in different places at the same time. Young girls, we are assuming that they will understand how technology operates, but it is just there, and girls take it for granted. And The divide comes from the creation point of view. I often get upset that we are just that digital divides are just framed in terms of connectivity, especially for poor women or for women in different countries and in less advanced countries. And actually, the problem is the brutal exclusion from creation that we have. And that's the problem. That problem is reflected in the design of things. The design of things is patriarchal, basically, and it doesn't take into consideration sensitivities and privacy issues by design, by conception. And I wonder how it will change with more women engineers, with more women involved in the design and usability of things, and more women mothers, for example, engaged in designing the products for children. I mean, it is, and even the philosophy, the architecture of the web, how everything is designed now, the impact that it has, the exclusion of women on that, because basically the internet, the web, and all the tech around us is the invention of mostly white men. And if we don't tackle that problem from the heart, from the design aspect, I don't think that we will overcome the pollution disaster that we have at the moment, that is surveillance. I mean, basically, the lack of, and maybe we are, like, by excluding women, we are like completely blocking the possibilities of developing a completely different social stream and public interest stream, a public interest stream for technology. So that level of literacy and involvement, and that push for inclusion, it shouldn't be inclusion to the telenovela internet that these girls are accessing to. Basically, Web Foundation conducted a very interesting study on how poor women and poor people in 10 different developing countries were using the web, and when they were connected for the first time. And I was so depressed and disappointed that because of this lack of awareness and this lack of inclusion into the creation aspect of the web, poor women are basically using the web for entertainment and for socializing, which is great, but it is just the TV web, you know. It is not a web that you will not launch the next startup by sharing pictures of your cat. I mean, well, maybe, but in a context, it is not. It is just access to the surface. It is not access. It is just access to the apples, not access to the tools to plant your tree of apples. And it is really, really sad to see how little use for political awareness, for political participation, and for learning things or even looking for a job. It is very limited in that aspect. And so, yeah, that's the most important thing that I want to emphasize.
Jillian, I saw you nodding quite vigorously.
Well, yeah, I can see on her screen there's a sentence that says practice women-centered design, and that's what Renata was talking about, but it reminded me about my phone. So if your phone is in your hand right now, hold it up. Okay. Blink. All right, I'm seeing a lot of phones about this size. So I think this is really interesting. This is a Sony Z1 Xperia. It's a kind of relatively inexpensive phone. I really like it. I like it so much I've had the screen replaced.
Getting paid. That's love.
Yeah, that's love. But the reason that I think this is really interesting is that this is the compact version. And this phone fits beautifully in my hand. It's got a nice thing here where I can take a picture without having to, I never have to use two hands with this phone. What's really interesting is that this version of it is only sold in Europe. So if you live in the United States, you get a phone that's about this much bigger and does not fit in my hand. I can't use it as well. I have to wonder if a woman designed this, because I would say that the vast majority of phones designed by men fit in men's hands, don't fit my tiny hands. And I think that that's really an important thing, is that the usability of these tools. But what I wanted to talk about, I was triggered by what Renata said. What I wanted to talk about was kind of just briefly, I work mostly on free expression, not privacy. But I think that the area that we're discussing is one where privacy and free expression often deemed to be at odds with each other, in discussions around things like the right to be forgotten. But in this case, I think that privacy and free expression go absolutely hand in hand. And that is to say that the moment that I express myself freely online, my privacy is violated. It happens almost every day. Just yesterday, sitting here in Brussels, having a conversation online about something political. Next thing I know, somebody's trying to argue with me, and then I look over to a different platform that was on Twitter. I look over to a different platform, and that person has started liking all of my public comments or public photos just to let me know that he's there and he's watching me. If you don't think that this is a daily kind of occurrence, then you're sorely mistaken. This is something that happens to me and other women who have any sort of profile, whether it's in this space or other spaces, on a daily basis. And sometimes it's just that minimally creepy thing that happened yesterday. I can hit the block button and everything's okay. And sometimes it goes much farther than that. And I think that comes back to also what Renata was saying, is that not only are our tools not designed in a way that supports everyone who uses them, but I think our policies aren't either. And so I realize we're at a privacy conference, but I'm just going to bring a free expression example because it's foremost in my mind. When I look at the policies of companies, the social platforms that we use every day, Facebook, well, I'm guessing a lot of you don't use Facebook and you are much more ethical than I am, but your Facebooks, your YouTube, Twitter, etc., most of these platforms have policies that are absolutely biased when it comes to gender. When you look at Facebook, for example, their nudity policies, I don't know if anyone else is as familiar with them as I am. I spend a lot of time reading Facebook's community standards. It breaks my heart. But women's bodies are treated explicitly different than men's bodies. Women cannot be topless, men can. And I realize that that's also reflected on our streets and that there might be good historical reasons for that. But when you look at Facebook and its role in the world, basically their policies have begun not only to cater more to men than to women, but also to cater to the lowest common denominator. And by that, I like to joke, but I'm really not joking that much, that Facebook's policies are basically catered to Saudi Arabia, not to the world as they should be. But that's getting slightly off topic. Anyway, my point is that I think that when we look at both of our tools and our policies, we need to bring more women into these conversations. Not only are the teams at most of these companies more than, I want to say 60%, all of them are 60% or more men. Yeah, some of them, Google's get close to 80, but I think Twitter's and Facebook's are slightly better. But regardless, at these companies, 60% or more men working there, sometimes up to 80%. The policy teams are mostly made up of American white males. There are exceptions to that, and there are some wonderful women that I've met working at these companies, women and other folks who are not on the gender, sorry, I'm really, really sleepy. Gender binary, that's what I meant to say. But for the most part, I think we need to do a lot better, and these companies need to do a lot better. They keep promising diversity, but they're failing at every instance.
Well, you touched on something that I wanted to bring up. I mean, we're here because we're talking about computers. But I mean, isn't it in many senses the internet is simply just an extension of everything else in the world, and therefore, are we tackling, I mean, okay, this is our specific sphere of interest, but perhaps the issue is not to be worrying about tackling the internet per se, or these issues we have with cyberbullying, but to say, actually, we need a complete, restructuring of society, because, white American male privilege is endemic in everything, not just in designing. Do you think that?
Yeah, virtual is absolutely real. I work directly with, and I see 9 million, I see statistics, I hear numbers, but then I'm from Bosnia and Herzegovina, for starters, so I have to put everything in my context, and I come from this less privileged countries, and you would be surprised how girls and women in the Balkans use, and to which extent we or they use technology. And what bothers me, and if we see universities and schools that deal with ICT, actual number of girls is bigger. We have 60% of girls and 40% of boys, and that is a beautiful thing. But then You have a problem when they're finished their universities. Job markets just really don't want girls there. Another problem that I have, and I really don't have problem of people sharing or girls and women sharing cats. I think it's lovely. What I want them to know, and I spend as an activist 24/7 online and offline with girls who go through severe online harassment in the country where virtual violence and online harassment is still taboo topic. And much less that we talk about like sexuality and internet and how do we use technology. To me, it's important that girls and women know all of the options that technology has to give them. I only have problems this morning. Another challenge, which is two. You said 9 million of girls go through online harassment by the age they're 15. And also they're not the victim, the ones that are survivors, but they're also perpetrators. And if we think about these numbers and then figures, and we go back to educational systems, it's 21st century. We're using technology on a daily basis, and still, and not only in Bosnian schools or in the ex-Yugoslav country schools, I don't really see good examples of putting this type of education in our educational systems. And how come we're not talking in our educational systems about tech and how to protect ourselves? Because I'm not really sure what are we waiting. And there's only so much that activists and NGOs can do. I cannot educate all 2 million of girls and women in my country. That's why I find allies through women's organization and queer organization and everybody who wants to be my ally. And I'm like, listen, technology is a beautiful thing, and this is the thing that can also happen to you if you expose yourself. And we also actually come right now from doing trainings around Bosnia and Herzegovina with journalists, activists, and what's the number 3? Politicians. Those are 3 categories of girls and women who go through the biggest number and through the very severe online harassment that actually doesn't end on the internet. And they are very often being raped or beaten up in a very physical world. So I would agree with you that, and that's something that we don't have. I'm not really positive that we're going to change the system and that's going to be less patriarchal. Well, someday maybe. We're going towards that. But currently, what I really want to not only talk about but do is sort of let's talk more about putting data privacy and conversation about online harassment in our schools and in our educational system. And I have one more challenge, and then I'll stop talking. Somebody said, yes, all these policies are created by white men, and I agree. But what also bothers me, and with all due respect, ladies, but we're all white here, and we're very privileged women sitting here. Even me, coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina, which, Google it, I don't have time to explain. We're the only country with 3 presidents in the world and 13 constitutions. So you can only imagine how... Belgium is sexy. Bosnia and Herzegovina is like, you don't want to go there. But don't Google it today. You will get depressed. And I just realized that I'm being taped. It's okay. It's okay. Well, my problem is these types of conversation are always in the smallest rooms with 25 people whenever we're discussing women in tech. And you always see, in majority of cases, led by my 4-year experience, it's always led by white and somewhat privileged women. So why don't we discuss these things with other girls and women who are interested in topic and are using technology and are experiencing online harassment? What about LBT women? Where are they? What about, we've been working with girls from Roma communities, and it's interesting, they're completely illiterate, so they cannot really read or write, but they use technology. You know why? Because technology gives them beautiful design of recognizing the little signs, the X, how Google looks, and that's a beautiful thing. But just to get to Roma girls, I first need to talk to their boyfriends, husbands, dads, and whatever, just to go and to actually educate them on how to use their smartphones, because they have their smartphones. And one of the things we did research with, and I promise I'll stop after this, we did research with Association for Progressive Communications, APC, and we were one of the 7 countries who participated in this research. And usually people think, well, you know what, technology is only used by privileged women around. But then when we went from, I live, born and raised in capital city, which is Sarajevo, but then I go to smaller cities, I go to villages, and I see that women there even more use technology because they don't have physical spaces to socialize. The only socializing moment happen via these, and they don't know how to protect themselves because I cannot really reach them on my daily basis due to lack of human resources and finances to get to them. And also they don't learn anything about online safety in schools. So what are we talking about? Why aren't we tackling this issue in educational systems? And I'm done. I'm not. Thank you.
Okay, Cheryl, you want
I think Gloria might want to.
Just about the room, just to clarify, last year we were in a smaller room, so we are making progress. So please, let's keep up the good work. We will manage to get
here, of course.
We'll get to the big room one year.
Yes.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I kind of thought the women's panel in the cave, that was about
At
right?
8:30 in the morning.
At 8:30 in the morning. But she heard about that from me. I'm barely awake, let alone if you came from somewhere even farther afield. But I think calling it the Assholes in Tech panel might have drawn more of a crowd, so let's do that next year. And a couple of things that I would like to jump in about, because I think all this input is really invaluable, is first that the Dalai Lama said that the world will be saved by Western women. So that's I think if he had a reason to say that, that might explain why we're here. But this event that I told you that we ran this past weekend, we had 40 women in Brussels, and among 40 women who gave that 48 hours of their lives, including, by the way, so I want to give a little bit of background on what we did, because it has embedded some of the kind of best practices I've learned and touches on the challenges that we're raising here. It was a startup event about tech, but we never said that. We said Female Digital Starter Weekend, meaning it was for beginners, digital, not necessarily tech. So and it was free. We got support from the Brussels region to do it. So we had to lower the threshold really as low as we could to get those women on board. Also knowing that not many women, especially from adverse economic situations or different cultural milieu, they're not necessarily available for that amount of time. If they might not be even allowed to be out of the house. But among that 40 people, I was shocked yesterday to calculate we had at least 22 nationalities from Africa, Asia, MENA, North America, Europe, obviously. So this kind of thing is very encouraging, I think, if you can, especially starting in big urban centers, that you can reach demographics that are very mixed. Of course, I didn't ask people about their sexual preferences, but let's say, it was women of all different colors. And I think it's through initiatives like this, we had other people from all over Europe who participated and said, now I want to go do this where I'm from. And I think that's a really critical thing, is getting women themselves to tackle the challenges that are before them, to lower the threshold for them also to demystify what technology and what digital is, because not only was it a kind of starter weekend, but half of the time was actually spent on training. How can I build a smartphone app? How can I build a website? How can I do some funky things like data visualization? They didn't even know what this stuff was, but after 2 days, they were actually doing it. Not as experts, but as the first step. And the feedback was more, obviously. More of this, more where I'm from, more women, more. So I think tackling it from this creator angle to actually get to convince young girls and adult women to be engaged as makers is really the very first step. Also the creation of the community, you know, that they have, because that's what we need, even out on the forefront, but that's also what they need to get in and get involved and stay involved. So that's just a pitch. I mean, I've been doing this for like 8 years now, and I need your support and your vision to help this to take off. The other thing I wanted to say is these are bottom-up initiatives, but we need kind of the overview that will connect them, and the vision and the leadership that will help us to influence how our ecosystem looks. And I also find that the governance of the internet, I mean, this is invaluable, priceless research on the ground. But if we just look at, you know, at the governance of the internet, this is also a very white male, highly educated phenomena. And it's also why I say that a free and open internet is a girl's best friend, because I think if I keep saying that, eventually more women will get engaged in governance of the internet. So we really need to be looking from the top down and the bottom up, and we need more allies among men. So that's why I say assholes in tech. What I've really missed is the guys who say, hashtag, you're an asshole, right? You suck, stop doing this. Because clearly what's happening out there in the larger space doesn't reflect, certainly doesn't reflect women's attitudes. I don't think it reflects the majority of male attitudes either. And I'd like to see kind of a he for she against assholes in tech. Really, I'm looking for the branding, so whenever you figure it out, let me know. But, okay, done. And there is Safer Internet Day in Europe, so I suppose you're in touch with them.
Yes.
But there are initiatives in Europe that are tackling these challenges. It's just about how well they trickle down to the ground.
Can I add something really quick to that?
Sure, but I also wanted people start thinking about whether you want to add something or just catch my eye. We'll have a, you know.
Just one quick
Yeah.
sentence. And for men wondering how men can be allies and can bring women up into the space, I feel really lucky that when I first started doing this work, I had a male mentor, an older male mentor, who I'm not going to name just for, I don't know, privacy. But he would get invitations to conferences to speak and would replace himself with me. Despite my being quite young and probably pretty unqualified at the time, but diving in head first like that and being given that privilege by somebody with extreme privilege, and it's now something that I try to give back. I think that's one way that male allies can step in, and older allies too. If you're an older woman who's been doing this for a long time, pull somebody up from the youth.
I also want to share just the patriarchal attitude to technology starts very early at home. And if you are parents of children who are girls, one of the things that we identify is the primary barrier is the barrier that parents put of access to the internet to girls, because it's dangerous, because it's full of, no stuff. So boys usually get first than girls the device, and the education that comes together with that to access the internet, because tech and boys goes together. Girls do different stuff, and that conception is really harmful. And the other thing is that we shouldn't excuse on cultural issues the delay and the barriers for women participation online. Of course, it is hard to challenge patriarchy, and it's hard to challenge the cultural situation in different countries. But through my work, I have found that there are ways, both in Guatemala and Pakistan, was the creation of community centers for girls and women to learn digital skills online. And it was lots of peer learning. I hate the idea of just a woman isolated with her device. A device can benefit lots of women. And the idea of internet cafe, community internet cafes for women just to interact online is great. And one of the barriers was that the parents were very uncomfortable of letting the girls, both in Pakistan and Guatemala, go alone to the internet cafe because of the assholes. The assholes were gaming all the time and saying things to the girls when they were approaching and getting to there. And so they were uncomfortable of the girls getting into mixed spaces. So the creation of those safe spaces is something that we can push our local governments to do in certain contexts. Even in Europe, there's more often the excluded women are the women from certain communities, cultural communities, and they will probably not go to the mixed event in tech. No. Maybe you need to create these kind of safe spaces. And the other thing, on the other extreme, I had a very interesting experience in Brazil. I don't know if you consider Brazilian women white women, but I don't know.
Women of color.
I said majority of times I see white women in a panel. I'm sorry, I wasn't concretely.
Yeah, it's very relative. Anyway, but these women, in Brazil, the is a very free culture in terms of sex and expression with the body, and it's quite the opposite of a conservative society in that aspect. And so. The girls of coding rights, what they did was, one of the problems of women there in Brazil was they were sharing nude pictures with everyone unsafely because they didn't understand how technology worked. And then the photographs of naked women were all over the internet, lots of revenge porn, lots of problems like that. It was a social problem because everyone was sharing the nude pictures. So they wrote I tweeted it, a very empowering guide on how to share sexy nudes online and how to share it safely, and how it was nothing against feminism. It was quite empowering and liberating for women to celebrate their bodies, but do it wisely. So you can go and adapt and adopt good practices regardless of culture.
I think we need to get Mr. Günther Oettinger onto this particular issue, since he decided to victim shame a lot of women who'd had there was the big scandal with the celebrities last year.
Women get told don't feed the trolls and don't send nudes. Right. Completely unrealistic
or close
counterproductive
your computer.
Advice.
Close your laptop.
Yeah. But actually, this is what I wanted to react, because you mentioned the Safer Internet Day. For me, when you look into what the Safer Internet Day, it's like a campaign with European support, so European funds against bullying, but there's a lot of this online safety idea that girls be protected, so don't take pictures of yourself, don't send them, just perhaps just close the computer, shut up, and don't dare go online, which is completely the opposite of what we want. Right. So if we want education, we have to see who defines how we approach this education. Of course, there are good examples, but actually now there are especially bad examples.
On the other hand, I think it's in the UN report. I couldn't find it. In fact, the young boys who get online before their sisters actually are looking for porn and doing. I mean, there are reasons for parents to be saying those kinds of things and thinking them, because we know how ugly it can be out there, right?
Okay, there's a lady here. I think this microphone at the front is on if you want to come up to it, or you can shout. It's up to you. You can shout. Okay.
If you want it to be recorded, you won't have. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rahab.
It'll probably pick up if you just start talking.
Yeah.
My name is Rahab Nimr. I'm from HP. I work as a data protection engineer. I have like 3 points very quickly. First one, I agree on lowering the threshold, because I go to the Anita Borg Women in Technology conference every year, and they said that women tend to underestimate their value, and men do the opposite, and that's reflects on how many startup technologies or startup in technology companies out there by women. So thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. Come help me.
Yeah, I will. The second point, I'm originally from Egypt, and during the revolution, lots of my female friends asked me how to like hide their identities online in order for them to actually voice their political opinion. Because if they were men and they are voicing their political opinion, that was fine. But once people know that they are women, they start shaming them, cyberbullying them, and so on, as we all know. So I do think, my third point, last point, I do think that we need tools done by women, targeting women's rights, digital or otherwise.
I agree. Thank you. Yes, and the lady with the glasses, and then, okay.
I agree, and I'll tell you about some of the projects they came up with, because that's really the awesome thing.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name is Fanny. I'm a human rights lawyer from Hungary. And I wanted to share with you that even in my very safe and cool NGO environment, there is lots of sexism. And not that I miss a male from the panel, and I'm happy to see an all-female panel, but for a change. But I was interested if there's anyone who... I have feminist men in my life, luckily, but not in the open, supportive way online, only in my personal life. And I was interested if who you could actually share this panel with a male panelist as well, who is open out there supporting this cause.
Well, I think I actually thought that as well. I mean, it's an all-female panel to discuss the issues of feminism, which is a bit... It's hard to say whether, okay, is this reverse the all-male panel watch that we've had this thing going on in Brussels, where so I'm not sure how many...
female panels.
Yeah, but... I mean, I think probably at this event there are probably plenty of men who would have been happy to come on here and add their voice to ours, but I guess this was just an organizational decision. Gloria will answer.
I take the responsibility because I hear a lot of criticism of the composition of the panel. It's so actually we will like to have men if they are relevant, but the big question, if you actually think about the CPDP guidelines, we should ideally have not only people of diversity, but also more policymakers in this panel. And for 2 years, I've been trying to think who the hell can we have as a policy maker representative really taking action during the whole year about the issues that we are trying to solve. Because I think for me this is the main concern. It's great to have conferences, local people, local initiatives. It's great to have this higher, very global governance, internet perspective. But for me the big question is, who is taking responsibility, active responsibility on those issues? If it's male or female, I really don't care. But that would be great indeed, and this is what we are looking for. And I think this debate, this is a question of, this is freedom of expression, this is copyright, this is privacy, this is blah, 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 and we don't really get the violence as such. But this specific question, it's not really treated as such, recognized as it should. But maybe you do have suggestions.
Yeah, actually, there are... Unfortunately or fortunately, they're women, but hey, that's cool. So next year we will definitely have some women on the panel, or at least policymakers. And in fact, one of the projects that came out of our weekend is a policy institute on this topic in Brussels. So we'll see if she gets some traction for what she's trying to do. There could be a whole kind of umbrella organization on policy in this subject for women.
Well, let me just challenge her a bit, because I mean we're all sitting here agreeing and it's lovely. I mean, I go to a lot of tech events, not just privacy-related events. So I'm at net neutrality. I'm sure like Jillian at net neutrality events. I'm at spectrum and telecoms issues events as well. And yeah, they are a bit.
More
but
women.
I see an awful lot more women at privacy events than I do at other forms of tech events. So, I mean, I'm wondering if we've really got the problem in our area. I mean, it's coming back to this question of tools for women to use, or the internet and digital connectivity as something that women help to design. And I mean, Vivian Redding was awarded last night. There was Nellie Groves was the commissioner before. I mean, there are women in this kind of sphere. And are we doing them a disservice by saying, oh no, it's all doom and gloom? And also, even if they're not women, even if they've just got other identities, again, they might still equally be feminists. It's not a gender definition.
I'm inclined to agree. I mean, I think if I look at the NGO space, I think, look, I work for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We're a women-led organization. Our highest leadership positions are all women. Most of our leadership positions are all women. And I have no doubt, I've never felt any hint of sexism in my office. It's a wonderful place to work. But I will say this, that the vast majority of the women who work for my organization do not participate much on the public social media. And so they're not experiencing the same types of things that I am, that the younger folks are. And I think that that's actually something to be pointed out and to be talked about, that a lot of the women in these higher positions don't necessarily experience what what your average woman online is experiencing. And that's not a criticism of my colleagues. They're wonderful, but I do think that that personal experience matters. The other thing that I would say is that when we're looking at, yes, NGOs, privacy, free expression, we've got plenty of women, and sometimes even more women than men, which I love. But I think that when we look at two areas, one is policymaking, and the other is the actual tech jobs, the tool building, the engineers, all that. Those are the areas where we're missing women. And I think that that's truest perhaps in the corporate space, in that, I would say it's even true at my organization. We have a tech projects team that builds tools, and I think there's one woman working on that team, so that's an area of improvement. But especially, again, I'm sorry to drive it home by seeing their names as the sponsors, especially at the corporations. They're all failing on this badly, both in policy and engineering.
Okay, now there's a couple of people in the room. There's a lady with the glasses and then another lady at the back.
My name is Lauren Reed. I'm the founder of WhenYou'reReady.org, which is an online community and a platform for survivors of sexual violence to share their stories. So in developing that over the last year, I've definitely experienced a great deal of cyber violence online for speaking out on the topic. And aligned with Belma's comment on being able to find allies online, I know that my frame of reference is Canadian and US and UK, and it's definitely very much from a place of privilege. And so I'd like to just ask, a few of you have talked about diversity and how these issues impact people across the globe and different, across cultures. Can you speak to the balance of benefit and harm, not only in Western developed nations, but globally and cross-culturally, for the good things that having access to technology brings to women versus some of the harm that's caused by it?
Okay, if you want to pass the mic back, we'll take another. One thing I will say, I was on another panel about a year ago. There's a wonderful woman called Lindsay Nefesh Clark, and she runs, it's W4 or Women World Wide Web, where she's in developing countries using the internet to get women like little startup jobs, or it's have a look for her, or come up and ask me afterwards. I'll point you in the direction of her. So that would be a very good example of positive outcomes. So, sorry, there was another lady, unless any of our panelists want to.
Yeah, while you're looking, there's a lot. Unfortunately, as I said, there aren't a lot of statistics on female tech starters, for example. But one of the key things that I'm trying to do every day is find those women and kind of pull them up and showcase them. But it kind of, if you've got to make some logical leaps, like we know that women in leadership and decision-making bring a values orientation, resonance with the consumer base, sustainability. So when women have the means in their hands to deploy their businesses online or whatever they are, from small cottage industry to bigger things, there is this social element that, you know, the kind of, what do I want to say? The wave of positive impact that comes from that. But unfortunately, there isn't a lot of research on that, and we don't really know. We just have to kind of knit the argument together and then showcase the ones who do make it through.
Okay.
Hi. I was wondering...
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry. My name is Rosamunde van Brakel. I'm from the Free University of Brussels and organizing committee of CPDP. I was wondering, concerning cyber violence and privacy, if you see any tensions in privacy and data protection regulation concerning cyber violence and holding perpetrators accountable online, because in my experience, I think the privacy of people who cyberbully can be in tension with the protection of the victims. I would like some comments.
And this is interesting, and perhaps we could also touch on the nature of volume. I mean, for example, one hurtful comment on Twitter is just one hurtful comment. It becomes the experience of being bullied and violence when there's multiple comments like that. I mean, hundreds and thousands if you've stuck your head above the parapet. but the question is each individual perpetrator of something mildly hurtful online guilty of bullying? I mean, this is the phenomenon. And it's not like in the schoolyard anymore because these people don't necessarily know each other.
I think, but I'd love to hear what the other panelists, their own experience is with this. But for example, as I said, one of the projects that we wanted to deploy was something that started as a Twitter bot, collected data on how a woman was being abused online and automated it, grabbing content from text messages, email, kind of semantic web crap. So pretty advanced. And surprisingly, we have the volition and the capabilities to do this. But one of the partners in the project who was less technically inclined was actually concerned about this question. And she went to the Belgian authorities, which is, the kind of secret, the federal police. And I think this area, it suffers the same challenges that we have about rape and other, victims of violence scenarios, that it's really about who you end up taking your case to, how they personally respond to your challenge, your situation. And unfortunately, we don't have the framework at the top in terms of legislation. So on the ground, it's even worse. The law enforcement agencies that you're dealing with don't even know what Twitter is, maybe. Like I said, the victims get the response that they should just close their laptops and stay offline, where they're actually at risk of physical violence, or because cyber stalking, physical stalking, sometimes it's just two sides of the same coin. So this gray area, it is definitely there. And actually, I started my intervention today raising exactly that problem. And I think where it is the most difficult and dangerous is really on the ground, where you have an issue and you take it to law enforcement. So education is clearly the key, not only for the women who are potential victims more often than men, and who then can also be potential perpetrators in a sense, if you think of young girls kind of bullying each other online, to the law enforcement and the stakeholders around those people, even schools, families, civic organizations, and then of course law enforcement. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of clarity that needs to be developed. But as you see with physical violence, this is an ongoing, moving target. So the challenges, I think, will kind of always be there.
Hang on, getting the microphone to you.
Physical violence, and that is the privacy aspect, in the sense that how far are we going to invade the perpetrator's privacy to make sure that they're held accountable in cases of revenge porn. And so what are we going to do? I mean, we're not going to use data mining and to search for the guys, and so. I mean, I think that there is this tension, and I think it needs much more discussion, and I kind of missed this discussion.
You need the legal precedent, so you need the cases that come to light. But like, if you look at something like The Making of a Murderer, I mean, you always have the ability to, you'll have the cases that don't respect the law, and unfortunately, because of the sexual bias in law enforcement, I'm not sure how quickly we'll have the positive precedents that we need to navigate.
Okay. Maybe Belma, do you face this kind of challenge?
You know what we did? That's actually one of the biggest challenges of online harassment, and not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in the ex-Yugoslav countries. I can be bullied, but and hundreds of girls that I've been working with, but the time that we tried to sort of go after perpetrator, we need to respect his right, even though he's a psychopath who's been bullying girls who are 18 and 15 for past 4 or 5 or 10 years. So that's it. It makes me mad, but at the same time, you also have to respect the human rights of the perpetrator, regardless of what he's been doing. What we did, and I agree with you, Cheryl, the thing you said that, for example, and I don't really believe in policies right now in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's not going to happen, because still, and when I go to police authorities with these girls, they tell me, yeah, she came to us like this week, and she said something about Twitter, but we didn't even write it down, because they don't even know what screenshot is. They don't know the dynamics of cyber. They don't know what online harassment is, because I'm dealing with like older police officers who are just like, she's just another girl for them. And these cases of online harassment are still sadly being treated as isolated cases. So what we did, we said, hello, sir, there's a little leaflet and it says the name of our organization. And whenever you see a girl that comes to you with case of online harassment, please send her to us. That's feasible in Sarajevo. In every other place, this is the one thing that we've been actually trying to sort of have a conversation with police officers. Okay, we don't have the law, but we can maybe just through information make these girls come to us, and then we'll talk further. Then we'll look for other types of help that we can provide. One thing that is also not being talked about and is related to your question is that dynamics of virtual and physical violence is absolutely the same. And we always, for example, if we talk about physical violence, we're always putting the girl into the safe house. We're never tackling the one who actually did the bad doings. It's also in the virtual world. Majority of the girls, when they come with the case of online harassment, which is not naive or easy to go through for a girl who's 15 or for a single mom or for any other person or girl and women that we've been working with, they usually say, you know what, it's so easy. You only like change your phone number or move away from Facebook and Twitter, and you don't really need that. You know, if that's the way you're getting your bullies to actually track you down, just turn it off. To me, that's crazy.
Stop wearing the short skirts.
Exactly. That sort of equals stop being on Facebook or Twitter or any other social media or any other space. So to me, that's crazy. And then I would go back, and I know I'm boring with this, but to education, to make her know, okay, you have all these rights. And yes, you should be exposed. And yes, you should be a politician who has, luckily, it's not, in Bosnia and Herzegovina is, everywhere. The more the woman or girl is exposed in terms of her political or sexual views or any other, the more online harassment she receives. Laws cannot do anything currently, so two things we need, education and solidarity, which we don't really have.
And the legal precedent.
Yes,
so
like a long-term,
yeah. Legal recourse, and we need cases. There's a great case in the U.S. now of a Hall of Famer baseball player whose daughter started getting threats online, and he went after and started court cases against the perpetrators. So it will be interesting to see what happens, but it's also important to know that legal recourse exists. So that's why I say we need the precedents, and then we need that to trickle down and to actually have the legislative ecosystem that is supportive and makes it gives ownership of the internet back to the people who behave and not to the ones who don't.
I mean, we also have to bear in mind, in the fiscal, there is a presumption of innocence. I mean, we're saying and we're taking it as, you know, oh, the perpetrators of this, they're alleged perpetrators, and you can't just suddenly, oh, you're a gamer, so you must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a lady here, yeah.
Hi.
Just speak into it.
Hello. Yeah, Julie Cohen from Georgetown Law Center. I just want to follow up on the previous question and maybe push you all a little harder. I'm hearing a certain amount of reluctance to push against some of the dominant presumptions in the legal frameworks surrounding all of this, right? So, and understandably so, right? So, particularly in NGO communities around gender, the larger NGO communities around freedom of expression and the open internet have to some extent been fellow travelers, right? But even that said, it's odd to me that the right to be topless on Facebook should be the poster child for gender equality online. And even that's not being fair, because those of us who came across the ocean to be here are tired. So maybe Jillian, you would have picked a different example on more sleep. But we're not going to build a Twitter bot to document and prove cyber harassment because we're concerned about the privacy of the offender. Well, okay, we're all here at CPDP, and I'm certainly a friend to privacy myself, as I think I've proved, but there's an implicit hierarchy underlying that statement, because there are contexts like large-scale cybersecurity threats in which people often say they are willing to build the Twitter bots and chase down the Chinese hackers or whoever they may be. So there's a hierarchy in which the private harasser is placed as not being very important, perhaps because that's just the way things are, or it's the assholes, so we can distance them from the larger rules that we're constructing to surround this online conduct. And I'm not hearing, and maybe it's early days, but I'm not hearing much in the way of an affirmative vision beyond education and solidarity for what it is that we, and I'm including myself in that, want to see as the rules structuring all of this. And let me push even more, right? The NGO world is female and supportive for a reason. It's relatively less prestigious and lower paid. The corporate world...
And socially oriented.
And socially
values-driven.
oriented, right. And all of those are good things, but what is it that you want to see? What is it that we want to see? What do we want to see designed? Do we want to see that Twitter bot designed? What is it that we want to see in the
what
legal
is your question
precedent?
exactly?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm totally with you.
Yeah. I think
you're going to help.
we're sort of talking in circles a bit here, and I think Renata knows about web we want. In terms of but
well,
I mean,
are we being chickens? I think you're accusing us of being chickens, but I think we're just being diplomatic, maybe.
Okay.
Well, I would say that effectively we have failed to articulate a positive agenda around these issues. And it is, on one side, we are like, yes, get online, get into tech. And on the other side, we have like this model of the way that the industry's structure is like a data extractive. And women are becoming data points that are like just monetized somehow.
3 minutes. We're not going to solve this in 3 minutes.
But
okay,
just very quickly, I think that you're right. We have failed in articulating from NGO side a positive agenda on what we want and how we want the rules to be fixed. Yes, there are principles here and there, but there's no concrete proposal that we can come to a parliament with and say, this is the way that we want the things regulated. And we want to, we are engaged in a very bad habit of getting everyone into the table and getting actors far more powerful than us in the table that impose the agenda at the end of the day. Corporates often, and corporates from the US often. And so the priorities of women get somehow synced. Maybe not in Europe, but in most of the world, that's the situation.
I'm just going to push back on being called out from that because number one, I live in Berlin, and so I actually have been here since yesterday, and I stand by my example. It might maybe not as the poster child, but as far as free expression goes, I do believe that the policies are made by men, that they are holding back women, and that women's bodies are once again on the line and once again being oppressed by men in the policies that companies and states put forth. And so while toplessness may not be my primary fight, nude art is a huge part of my primary fight, and I'm going to stand by that.
I think we're also, just that UN report I referred to only came out in September, and I think it was quite revolutionary that the people within the UN managed to get this topic on the radar and get some resources. And I can tell you it took a lot of finagling because, as I said, that working group has been disbanded in the meantime. So it was their last hurrah to get the report out. We don't have data. We don't have research. There is movement on this topic, so I think you can't even have a decent conversation, a discussion. You don't have the arguments. And it's in a field unfortunately, like all the rest, maternity leave or parental leave that gets flagged as being a gender topic and gets marginalized. So I think what we're doing here is working from the ground up. We certainly need the top-down direction as well. So I'm really proud that from the small weekend we had that this is something that crystallized. There's a young woman who wants to launch an umbrella policy organization in Brussels to push this question forward, to develop a positive agenda. I love how you characterized that, Renata. But it is really early days indeed. And I think that since you identified the challenge, your expertise is critical in helping to develop what that agenda is and to get us not only following the discussion and looking for the precedents, but really saying what it is that we want. But again, it is a difficult discussion. But I think just having this here today is already a positive step.
Okay, and it is 10 o'clock. And I know there were some more questions, but I guess we have run out of time. I think probably we haven't, we're not going to ever solve this issue in one panel. But maybe next year we need a couple of more panels that will address, because it's been so broad and sweeping that we've really struggled to narrow down on any one thing. And we could probably have been here all day discussing this. Thank you, Gloria. Do you have any last words?
No, thank you very much. And let's continue the conversation if you like during the coffee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.